Da har vi regissøren tilbake. Takk til dere som sitter igjen for en liten samtale om denne filmen. We will turn to English. Welcome back to the stage again, Guðmundur. Yep. And thank you so much for this very moving film.
Thank you.
I want to start off with, you know, at any festival, some of us see maybe 4 films a day. You move from different countries, and especially you move from different emotions. And it can be very emotional. For example, here in Tromsø, where you have strong stories, maybe very funny ones. And for me, for example, just watching your film again on the big screen today, it struck me how intensely emotional it is. And the story itself is maybe not so suspenseful, but the emotions are. So even though they kind of walk around and hang around, it's always that intensity. To start off, could you maybe talk a little bit about the origins of the story and the way you sort of focused on this very emotional young world? It's not only the 2 friends, it's the sisters, it's the girls, it's like a whole world.
Yeah, the story is inspired from a period when I lived in a small town in Iceland called Tromsø. And I kind of based it on myself, my friends, my 2 older sisters, you know, so that's kind of the foundation. But then of course when I started writing, it becomes a fiction. You know, as a teenager and a kid, I remember always, you know, wishing that the grown-ups would understand our world, you know, a little bit better, and, you know, and not kind of dismiss our problems as just, you know, small problems. You know, and I kind of wish that I could show them. And when I started writing the script, I was very focused on both trying to show, you know, the world I remembered as truthfully as I could, you know, and not have any borders as an adult on what I want, you know, what I was allowed to show.
And the children are, of course, then in the center of the story.
Yeah.
The way you have written it, there's a lot of absent fathers, especially fathers. And it's interesting, I'm sure everyone has a personal way to relate to a coming-of-age story when we are young, but personally, growing up with sisters, I mean, those big sisters, damn it, I was like... so you have this young cast, fantastic actors, I must say, but as we all know, probably working with young people, children, they might not be trained. Could you talk a little bit about that process? Like how did you approach working with these fantastic, and how did you find them?
Yeah, because in Iceland we don't have professional actors this age, so we had an open casting and we got around 1,000 kids, you know, that showed up, and it became a little bit too much, you know, to meet every one of them, and you know, but we had to find those kids. And in the end, we found more kids than we could use that we thought were very talented and interesting. But these kids, because they hadn't acted before, so we had like almost a 10-month kind of workshop with them, where they
10 months, almost a year,
yeah. Yeah, where they would come 3 times a week for 2 hours every time and just, you know, learn acting and, you know.
So you put them to school and made them professional in a way. No?
In a way, yeah, in a way. And we put up a lot of rules. You know, they were not to, like, in the beginning, I could see that their attention span was very short. You know, I was talking to them and they were like, you know, looking all over. So we so there was no sugar. You know, we took the diet. We you know, they had to train. They had to do a lot of stuff to kind of build up. Also because we wanted to see how, you know, how willing they were to push themselves in a rehearsal period, and make them understand that this was not going to be fun. Basically, this was going to be work and really hard, and we wanted them to understand it before the shoot, so we wouldn't have any problems during the shoot.
But also, I mean, one thing is technically and for the whole film production to work and for the kids to understand that, but this story and these emotions are really tough emotions to move into as an actor, I'm sure. And did you have what did these kids say to you about how they related to the story? Did they find their own lives sort of in it, even though it's based on your growing up?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they were not allowed to read the script until just before the shooting, but we made sure that they knew all the hard scenes. You know, they would know what those were, and they were willing to do that. And about the tough emotions, we tried to create an atmosphere where they understood that they were not responsible of acting well, basically. You know, their only responsibility was to try and be positive.
So they could make mistakes.
Yeah. You know, and it was completely fine to make mistakes, but it was not fine to complain or not try. You know, then I would get angry if they were like, oh, I can't do it. You know, then, you know, because they were not allowed to say that. They had to try, and it was fine if it didn't work, but they just had to try as long as I asked them to keep on.
And you asked them for quite
a lot.
Quite a few difficult things. I
Yeah.
mean, one thing is the emotional, one thing is kissing girls or kissing boys, but climbing down the mountain to pick up eggs, that scene was pretty spectacular.
Yeah, that scene was actually our Norwegian cinematographer, Sturla, who did an amazing job on this film. We talked a lot about that scene and how we could shoot it well, because we didn't really have budget to do a lot of CGI, and, you know. So he got this idea that we should just go over the cliff, and this was, you know, relatively close to the shooting, and I brought it up with the kid, and he was up for it. He's like, yeah, can I take a selfie while I'm there? And I was like, yeah, no problem. And we talked to his parents, and of course we had a lot of safety, so this was completely safe, but it was extremely scary, because I was the first one going over just to kind of show everyone in the crew and everyone that this was fine. And I remember hanging there and thinking like, oh my God, like I was so scared. I was really thought like, what am I doing in this situation? Why do I do this? You know, but I was happy that I only had to be there for like 2 minutes, not the whole day, like Sturla and that kid.
It worked really well. Actually, I think for the Tromsø audience, they know Sturla Brandtgrøvlen, the Norwegian photographer. He was behind the camera for last year's Icelandic film here, Stabukker or Rutar. Yeah. So we talked with him about that, and it's interesting to talk a little bit about the theme in the film. I think it's interesting how the images are constantly helping out to make that emotion also visible on the screen. And it's even in the title of the movie that there's this disparity between the really warm emotions but also really rough and hard way to deal with them. Heart and stone. It's kind of like, I'm sure that was part of it. It was never mentioned in the film though, the word in the title. No. But I feel I can sort of spot it many places. Could you talk a little bit about that contrast, sort of?
Yeah, I mean that is kind of the pure, like the foundation of the film. It's, you know, we have a lot of really warm emotions and really hard one, and that's kind of how the nature is. Probably here for you guys as well. In Iceland, it's like extremely beautiful, but it's very, you know, rough and deadly as well. You know. So it's, you know, growing up in Iceland, you always have this, you know, imagine of your world around you that it's, you know, that it's beautiful but very dangerous. You know, just the nature itself. About Sturla's work with the cinematography, it was kind of like a dance between him, me, and the kids. The kids were allowed to improvise their emotion, like their movement. They had to say the dialogue that was in the script, but they could move around as they wanted. And this came very much from Sturla, that he wanted to be free with the kids and kind of dance with them.
So he knew them very well as well.
Yeah. And we worked. This is our third. We've done 2 short films together, so we knew that in this film we wanted to kind of push ourselves and take a little more chance about how to, you know, how the visuals, kind of try to achieve the visuals that we really want for the film, and I think we managed that. Yeah,
and it's interesting. I think maybe many here have seen quite a few Icelandic films. There's a high production. A lot of them are screened here in Norway. And it's always about the landscape, and I like that. I mean, you might call it a cliche, but that's the world of Iceland, and even especially this part of Norway. But you also have so many beautiful close-ups, and sometimes I was kind of surprised because it doesn't feel like an Icelandic tradition to, you know, under the sheet, the camera is all so close, and for example, these young kids have to play against the huge camera. That intimacy is probably not so easy to get either.
No, we wanted to try to serve the kids as much as we could with the camera work, and try to build as much intimacy as possible. Okay. So we had a rule like never show the nature unless if it's serving the story, and sometimes we were like in these beautiful spots, and I would kind of have to bite my hand, that we were just shooting this close to the kids, and not showing what the surrounding, because it served the story more to be that close, or that's how we felt.
I promised we would take some questions from the audience as well. I got a few off my own chest. To open it up, if anyone wants to ask something, and I can repeat it here. We don't have an extra microphone. Yeah, on row 5, and use your voice.
I just wondered if you could comment on the attempted suicide and why you chose to take the film in that particular direction.
Yeah.
Good. So the question is if the director can talk a little bit about the dramatic moment at the end of or towards the end of the film, where there's a suicide attempt, and why you chose to go more dramatically into that, because the film before that doesn't really have that many sort of hard-hitting dramatic moments.
Yeah. Well, it's mostly because I had a couple of friends that took their lives as a teenager, and especially one that was very close to me. So in this film, I actually wanted him to survive. There's kind of like a darling for me that I didn't want him to die because I thought it was too sad.
Was it his name at the dedication? The first credit that came up after?
Yeah. He took his life that point. Yeah.
And when you know that you want to bring up that dramatic moment, was it important for you to find a way to build it up that you could sort of evolve the story from moments and more in a dramatic direction?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's it can be a taboo thing to have suicides in film, and it's a difficult subject to have. But the reality is that in Iceland, especially in small towns, there is a lot of suicide by young boys, teenage boys. And not all of them, no one knows the clear reason. It's manufactured, it's the darkness, it's like, lack of things to do. It can be fear about having to leave that place, because, it can be your sexuality. There's a lot of elements that play in. And I think, I don't know, I would expect it's a similar thing in northern Norway, because I know like many places in the north kind of are dealing with that.
Any other questions from the room? Can I see a hand? No? I have one myself though, so I can jump to that. Don't be silent if you want to ask something. I noticed that a lot of animals are paying the price with their lives here. First the cod, and then there's the birds, and then there's another cut to the sheep when they are burnt. And then in the end, when you cut to this fish that goes down, I thought, well, the final shot of a dead animal, but then it starts swimming again. Yeah. An idea like that, it's a visual idea, and it's when you edit like that, it feels like you mean it, that I should notice it. But is that a kind of idea that you had very early on in the script, or would it come through the shooting, through the editing, and you find like I can make a metaphor here, or I could at least make some motive in the visuals?
No, it comes in the script. Like everything in the film came in the script sense. When I moved to a small town from the city when I was around 6 years old, and it really struck me how the kids would treat animals. Because they would have no respect for animals that they were not used to eat, and then they would have respect for the animals that were kind of farming or birds that you could eat and stuff. But kind of the vouchers animal, many of the kids had no respect for them, and we would like stamp on bull roads and hunt seagulls and stuff like that. Not all of us, but that was not considered a big thing, and that kind of shocked me in a way. And I think it's I've heard from I like a guy who lived in a small town in Iceland, and it wasn't like that. And then he moved to another small town, and then it was like that. So so it's not it's not everywhere, but it's some kind of mentality in some towns where this is completely fine. About the fish in the end, I wanted the film to have a happy ending, and give us a little hope for Christian.
I feel very sad at the end of your film, but I do agree that when that fish swims away, it kind of gives that little...
Yeah, gives a little happy ending.
Yeah. Anyone who wants to ask something? We might also be closing in on the time. There's another movie starting. This is your first feature film, actually, your debut. And I know that not only me, but festival audience here, the Icelandic films, you always put a ring around it. You want to go and see that Icelandic film. So what is on your plate? Is there another film coming that you could tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, I'm writing now my next film. I had decided to grow up and work, have adults as main characters. But then I work a lot with my dream and intuition. And then this period of my life was kind of hunting me in my dreams. And I thought, okay, I should sit down and look into that. And now I kind of fell in love with another coming-of-age film. But it's a very different subject. It's about city boys, and it's more about hierarchy and violence, basically. But I'm very excited about that film.
Okay, sounds very exciting. We look forward. Hopefully, we can see it here in the future.
Yeah.
Well, let's give a warm hand to Guðmundur Arnar Guðmundson. And thank you for spending time with this Q&A. See you around.
Thank you.